We have been in touch with representatives of Gain Horse Feeds who were responsible for the contaminated batch of horse feed that meant that Aidan O'Brien couldn't run any horses at Longchamp today. They are preparing a statement for us as we speak. We'll have that for you in about half an hour's time. But delighted to welcome my first guest to Luck on Sunday this week. 24 wins this season at a 26% strike rate. That's amongst the highest in the country. Started with 15 horses this year and has 32 in now. Just reward for all that success after 5.5 years as assistant to Hugo Palmer. George Boughey is out on his own and flying. George, welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
The thing's going incredibly well. Just tell me about your target at the start of the season, which was June the 1st.
We wanted to have 10 winners. I thought it was a pretty realistic target. We had some seasoned handicappers that we bought at the sales and, 10 two-year-olds. So, yeah, and to have had 24 winners already is a huge credit to my team. I'm delighted, and it's great to be a part of it, really.
How do you think it's happened? What would you say is the secret to it all unfolding well this year?
I actually, when I was at Hugo's, he was very kind to me. He let me have a yard for him, and I had 50 horses for him on the Hamilton Road. And myself and Adi Rogers, who's my head lad now, he was a big part of, and he is still a big part. He's a big part of my team, and we had the confidence to go and do it. I didn't have the horses when I started. We started with 4 or 5 50, 60 rated horses, and it's we've put it sort of the same things into practice that we did 3 or 4 years ago, and it's we just sort of believed in what we were doing, and it's paying off, really. When
did you first decide you wanted to be a racehorse trainer?
I think in my mid-teens, probably. From not a racing family as such, it was quite a bold statement. My dad's a farmer in Dorset, and we've got a couple of trainers that trained on our farm, and I didn't really know how to get into the game, and it was quite a big leap. But when I was at school, I sort of followed racing avidly, and Michael Bell's my brother's godfather, and so there was a bit of a sort of in there, and just trying to get a job when I left school was pretty tricky as a moderate rider, but that's a while ago now, and it's great to be sort of where we are, really.
And what was it about training that kind of flicked your switch in those teenage years? So I guess at the time you could really have gone into anything you wanted. Yeah,
I was very lucky to have a good education, and I think my masters at school were pretty amazed I wanted to train racehorses. It wasn't a conventional thing to do. Everyone went to university and went and worked in the city and that sort of thing. And it's probably quite a high-risk strategy, and it still is. But I loved horses and loved racing, and I was never going to be a jockey. I think if anyone who's seen me ride would clarify that. So it was a sort of natural progression as to what I was hoping I would be able to do.
So what was your first job in racing?
My first job in racing really was working for Luke Lillingston at the sales, just sort of as I'd left school. I'd ride out for trainers. I actually did a couple of weeks work experience with John Joe O'Neill years ago, which was great, and I think I fell off as many times as I stayed on. But no, and then when I was at Newcastle University, I sort of rode out for trainers up there, and then went to Australia after university and worked for Gay Waterhouse, which was great.
Is that where the Palmer connection came?
It was. I actually met Hugo before I went to Australia, but he worked for Gay and he worked for Luke Lillingston as well, and there was a bit of a sort of connection there. So when I came back, Hugo had about as many horses as I have now, and I think I was surplus to requirement. But I remember there was a time where he called George Scott, who had put me in touch with him, and said, I'm not sure he's quite up to it yet, but Hugo saw my determination, and we worked from the bottom. I was just sort of mucking out and riding out, and progressed into what we did together, which was, it was great.
I'll come back to that in just a moment. Tell me what it was like working for Gay Waterhouse. I always enjoy people telling me about their experiences there, nearly as much as I enjoyed interviewing her myself about 1.5 years ago.
She's a fantastic woman. The drive she has still at sort of her age is amazing, and it's a tough world. Racing's hard everywhere, but they're up at 2:30 in the morning, and she was meticulous. She had horses all over the country and knew everything about all of them. She was a fantastic trainer, and most notably, I think her people skills were amazing. She had horses for everyone, and still does, and she was just a fantastic trainer, really, all encompassing.
Did you feel like you knew a lot more when you'd finished there than you did when you started? Was it a worthwhile exercise from that point?
Yeah, it was. Gay was very good to me. I worked in all of her 4 yards in Sydney, and she has 4 different places in one city, which is pretty amazing to think. If we train in Newmarket, you've got one base. But yeah, I went racing with her. She sort of took me under her wing and was very good to me. We don't speak that much anymore. It's quite hard on a sort of time zone, but I always see her when she comes up for Ascot or the July meeting. So that's.
What did you learn about the mechanics of training down there?
I think the biggest thing down there, it's slightly different to here because it's on such a larger scale. A great friend of mine, David Eustace, who's training down there now, they have hundreds and hundreds of horses. Here, people think you've sort of got a big yard if you've got 150. It's running. I remember Gay said to me on my first day, she said, I run a hotel, not a racing stable. It's one horse in, one horse out. Always has to be full. It's a business as much as anything. But yeah, it's a very different game down there. It's much more driven for speed, and they're buying all of us. Well, not all of our stayers, but our top end handicappers and winning Group 1s down there. It's a very different game, but it taught me a lot. Sort of over the year that I was there, really.
Were you tempted to stay?
Very, yeah.
Were you?
The visa's quite tricky, and I think it's proving even trickier now to stay down there or move down there. But yeah, look, naturally, the prize money thing is the biggest factor. We've had 24 winners this year and earned 124 grand in prize money, I think, which down there, or even in France, you might be earning. In France, 400,000, and down there you might be nearer to 7 figures. So, yeah, I was very tempted, but look, we're very happy in Newmarket at the moment, and long may it continue, really.
Gay Kellaway was on the show last week. She correctly identified that you're unlikely to go hungry because you, like me, and a lot of people in the sport have had quite a privileged upbringing. But in reality, when you've got to do it for yourself and you've got to make your own money, it doesn't matter how privileged your upbringing has been. You've still got to make the books balance, and you've still got to pay people. Just talk me through the early part of training and how it impacted on you from a financial point of view.
Well, I think I took a bit of a different stance on it, really. Like I said, with the prize money, it's pretty tricky, and a big part of what I want to do is trade horses, and without using our racing body as a nursery for other countries, I think you have to look at different avenues. Sam Haggis and I bought a handful of horses at the October hit sale last year, and we've traded them quite well already. 2 of them that have been sold have both been at a profit, and one at quite a considerable profit to Australia. He was my best horse, and it was sad to lose him, but he won a Newbury and a Windsor handicap for us, and had to move on. But yeah, it's tricky, but that's a big stance of what I want to do. And at the start, we had some very lowly rated horses, and as you can probably see by my percentage last year, it wasn't pulling up any trees, but it proved that we could train winners with bad horses, which, in no disrespect to them being bad horses, but they were low-grade animals, and we're trying to build up slowly by buying tried horses and improving them off other stables.
So how do you go about, this is what fascinates me, starting up and running a business when you've got no property of your own, you've only got half a dozen horses, you've got to employ staff, pay them, pay your PAYE, pay your VAT, your tax, all the rest of it, and run the business properly. How do you actually feed yourself at the end of the day?
It's very tricky, and at the start, literally was just me and my head nad, 80 Rogers, and day one was the 2 of us and 4 horses, and we were mucking out, riding out, doing everything, and it builds slowly, but there's ways to do it, and I think I was very well supported by my feed merchants and farriers and whatever. It was very hard to pay them at times, and fortunately we've always had our staff paid on time. But that's slightly digressing. But it is, with prize money alone, it's very hard. But with a few good deals that we've done recently, we've been able to get the ball rolling a bit more and take a bit more of a punt at the sales and try and buy a better type of horse. And fortunately, they've been bought off us rather than owing them to Tattersall's, and then they've been very good to us as well. So it was quite a big punt, but it is paying off, and it's been a few sleepless nights trying to Thursday evening trying to pay the wages. But no, it's all rewarding now.
And what was the moment when you thought, I need to go it alone here? You know, as I said, you'd been with Hugo Palmer for 5.5 years, but you're still incredibly young. What are you now?
28.
28, exactly. Yeah. So you took the decision to start training at 25.
Yeah.
Really, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's incredibly young by modern standards.
Well, like I said, you know, when I had a yard for Hugo, which he, you know, it was his confidence in me, I think, having worked for him for, I think it was 3 years at the time, to go and, you know, obviously he was there every day and we were talking, but, you know, I would do the board and we'd do everything together and he was always on the end of the phone. But we had some quite nice winners over there and some nice 2-year-olds that would progress over to his yard and then they go on, and it was kind of like a nursery. But yeah, we spoke a lot. You know, I almost gave him 2 years' notice as to when I was going to leave, so we were prepared. You know, Hugo was prepared for me to leave, and I could sort of share things with him, and you know, he's been a huge sort of help for me even when I'm training now. So,
did you ever think, what on earth am I doing? What on earth am I getting into?
Yeah, quite a few times. And everyone says to you, you're mad, and probably still are mad, but I think, you know, the way that I'm looking at it is just, I want to, I think, you know, you can make it a decent living if you get to the right standard and you get the right horses in and the right numbers, and at the bottom level, you know, it is very tricky to make it work, and you know, we're not making good money at the moment, whereas you could be in other countries, but I think if you can get to training the right horses for the right people and the right breeders and have the right numbers, then it is a very feasible career.
But it's interesting because you come from a stockman's background, you come from a farming background, but you have to be, you're articulating that now, to make it in your game, you have to be more than just a stockman, you have to be a sharp, on-it businessman as well. And that side of it obviously appeals to you.
It does. It's actually the thing that appeals to me almost the most is, you know, it's not just training horses now, I don't think. You know, in the days gone by, you know, the champion trainer had 60, 70 horses. You know, you wouldn't know what number the top trainers have now, but they have their number in training, and the majority of them are in full work. You know, all of our horses at the moment that we have in are not in full work. You know, we've got horses trotting, we've got horses on the walker, we've got horses who've just been gelded, and I think, you know, I want to get to a point where we have the right numbers to be able to make it really work, yeah.
What do you think you're doing right at the moment? Because you're obviously doing something right with numbers like this.
I spend a lot of time trying to find races for the horses. I think, you know, we haven't had runners at the big meetings yet. Well, I run a 2-year-old at Ascot who, you know, he ran very well at Newmarket, but I'd much rather be at Wolverhampton on a Friday night than Newmarket on a Saturday, until, you know, the filly won the other day, which was fantastic. But, you know, our percentages at the lower tracks, and again, no disrespect to them, but have been probably higher than the ones at the better tracks at the moment. But for me, I'd rather win a race than be third in a bigger race and your mark goes up. You know, we've plotted a few horses quite well. A horse called Songkran, who's improved sort of 25 pounds, but he won 4 on the bounce in a month. And it was probably because he was running against lesser oppositions, and you know, he was a very durable horse. He's a star. But I think it's the placement of the horses, I think, is as big a thing as training them, really.
And that's something you get a kick out of?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I think anyone who's close to me would say that I probably spend more time on racing admin than anything else. But no, I think it's a big part of it, yeah. I love it.
And is that something, have you always been interested in that side of racing, if you like, the statistical side of racing, the analytical side of the sport?
Yeah, I have. I think, you know, when I was at school, I used to get the Racing Post every day and that sort of thing. It's all, form is, I've always loved form. It's probably the biggest thing. You can't just run them where you want. It doesn't work. So, you know, there's a certain level where horses can win and when they can't. So, you know, that's again to the trading point where we need to leave enough in the locker before we sell horses to, you know, I worked for Lloyd Williams when I was down in Australia, and I wasn't there very long, but one thing he said to me is, you have to be a trainer that people can buy off. You can't completely exhaust the horses and then sell them because no one will come back. And in this game, you know, it's a trading game for me nowadays. So,
have you sold any to him yet?
No.
It's only a matter of time.
No, I haven't, but hopefully one day.
And just in terms of of this season and how well it's gone in such a short space of time, with success, of course, comes growth. And you will have seen it at Hugo Palmer's, and he's spoken quite openly about the fact that his expansion was almost quicker than the infrastructure could cope with at the time, having had classic winners quite early on. Is that something you're quite mindful of? Yeah,
I am. I'm very mindful of it. The biggest thing that I'm trying to do at the moment is employ the right staff and the right people in place, and have, you know, if we are to be sent more horses, to be able to manage it. You know, we've got room for 50 at the moment, which I'm very happy with. We've got 32 horses in at the moment. We've just taken on the second barn as of a few days ago, and you know, I'm happy with that at the moment. I think, you know, increasing the quality rather than quantity is a big thing for me. When horses can't win, I don't really see that owners should be in this climate paying for them, and we try and move them on. And have your owners all been quite supportive? Obviously, when things are going well, it's great, but have they all stuck in and stayed in this year? Yeah, they have, and you know, my owner pool was very small at the start, but you know, it's growing, and there are several horses who, you know, we've had a couple of horses who haven't run for months, and you know, I was sent on a WhatsApp group yesterday saying, you know, thanking them for their patience, because there's a filly who's about to come back to the track, and she's been off. She just wasn't a summer filly, and you know, their patience of paying £2,000 a month to have a horse in training, whatever it is, and through a tough time like this is, you know, I owe a lot to them as well, because people can take horses away when they like, and they haven't had a horse leave the yard, which is a credit to them, really. And we were talking about selling horses to Australia. I mean, one candidate would be a horse that you won with the other day, I'm guessing, the Camelot horse, Lostwithiel. And that's your first, I would say, success for a major Middle Eastern concern for Alice Ale Bloodstock. Yeah, he's a lovely horse who we didn't actually expect him to win first time out. He's quite a raw horse who'll be better at 4. And no, it was great to have a winner for them. It's my first horse for a Middle Eastern client, which is great, and he won first time out. So, yeah, he does appeal to the Australian market because he's proven he stays a mile and a half. He's by Camelot, who's the flavour of the month down there with Russian Camelot. But look, they're a big operation who I imagine will want to keep the horse at all costs. Really, he could be a really fun horse for them next year. And you talk about planning and meticulous planning, getting horses in the right races. You certainly got Mystery Angel in the right race at Newmarket during the Cambridgeshire meeting, because that, unusually for this season, was a huge pot for relatively speaking. This is her on the stand side rail in the Nick Bradley racing colours. Was this you or Nick or both? It was a bit of both. I'd say Nick is a master at placing his horses, and look, we get on very well, and he's a huge supporter of the yard. And we were tracking the race at the sale at Tats, and it didn't look the strongest of races, and she's a filly who, ever since she came to me at the Breeze Ups, you know, she's been quite hard to get the weight off, so she's improved dramatically with each run. And I thought she was well handicapped off 72, and she proved it. But no, look, Nick and his team do a fantastic job, and you know, they've got 4 yearlings with us already for next year, which is great. You know, they the success this year is staggering, really, and I think their filly will run a massive race today in the fillies race in France. And that's it. You were talking about horses winning at Bath and smaller tracks, and you would prefer to win those races rather than go to the big tracks and finish third. But it's just starting to come now. Winners at the bigger venues. Newmarket the week before, you'd been at Newbury. Mirage Mack was winning a maiden there. She's out again this week. I just declared her before we came on air. Yeah, she'll actually go to Southwell on Tuesday. She's a sort of American bred filly who, as you saw the other day, you know, she looked as much a colt as most of them in the paddock, and she shouldered a penalty against the colts to do it, and we hope that she might be progressive as well. But yeah, look, she won at Newbury, and she's going to Southwell because I think she'll win. We'll see, but the owners are very supportive because, you know, she could really feasibly have been put in a stakes race. Now, I'm not saying that she should, but she's running for £3,500, and she could invariably get beat. So, no, she's a lovely filly for next year, and I'm actually a bit of a fan of the sire. I don't think he had the strongest of book of mares, and we tried to buy one at the sales of the day, and they're not making much. And remind me who she's by? Bobby's Kitten. Bobby's Kitten, of course, who stands at Lamways. By Kitten's Joy. By Kitten's Joy, exactly. I know, we bought her for 22,000. She was a relatively inexpensive filly, and the offers were on the table for her after she won at Wolverhampton, because she did it in quite good style. Most of mine, well, invariably they do take a big step forward for their first run, and you know, it's a credit to the McAlpines who have turned the money down, and you know, she's a special filly to them. So yeah, she should be a lot of fun next year as well. She's massive.
You got so much to look forward to. Obviously, this season has massively exceeded expectations. So, what do you do as far as setting targets for next year, and what are your immediate ambitions, George?
My immediate ambitions, I think, are probably to again keep getting the best out of every horse that we get sent or we buy. The next thing that I'd love is a stakes horse. You know, we've got 2-year-olds who are winning. We've had a handful of 2-year-old fillies win recently, which is great. We've got a handful more who I think may be as good as the ones that are running. You know, they're no superstars, but if we could find a stakes horse, I think that's where it really puts you on the map to people thinking you can train a good horse rather than just win races. So, yeah, a stakes horse is the thing that we're looking for at the moment.
Well, with this trajectory, I'm pretty confident that you're going to find one, at least one, for next year. George, thank you very much for chatting to us, and best of luck for the rest of the season, and of course for the forthcoming sales.
Thanks, Nick. Cheers.
George Boughey, who with 24 winners to his name this season, is enjoying a fine time of it. Good luck to him.